Hi. Good evening. Welcome to this evening's reading by the director of the Rose O'Neal Literary House, Dr. James Allen Hall. My name is Roy Kesey. I'm the associate director here, and that's going to make things weird. Before getting into all that, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. The Rose O'Neal Literary House acknowledges this region as the original homelands of the Waikamis, the Choptank, and the Nanticoke tribes. We acknowledge their painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory. We honor the indigenous peoples still connected to this land, and we are committed to making our community a more equitable and inclusive place to gather and learn. Now, James Allen Hall's most recent book, the one we are here to celebrate tonight, is Romantic Comedy, winner of the Leavis Prize and published by Four Way Books in March of this year. Their previous books are the poetry collection Now You're the Enemy from the University of Arkansas Press in 2008, and a book of lyric personal essays with the magnificent title, I Liked You Better Before I Knew You So Well, published in 2017 by Cleveland State University Poetry Center Press. They've won awards and grants from the NEA, Lambda Literary Foundation, Texas Institute of Letters, Fellowship of Southern Writers, New York Foundation for the Arts. I could go on. Their poems and essays have appeared in Boston Review, Tri-Quarterly, Alaska Quarterly Review, Critical Mass, and Diagram, and have been featured by the Academy of American Poets and the Poetry Society of America, among many other excellent venues. In other words, Dr. Hall is the real deal. That is a breathtaking amount of poetic and essayistic success for any one person. And if it seems like I read it kind of quickly, it's only because I'm eager to get to the next part, which is where I make this all about me. Do you have any idea how hard it is to write an introduction for a reading by your boss? If it is good, and you say so, no one will believe you. They'll just think you're sucking up to get a raise, and I want a raise. But that's not the point. The point is that there's just no winning, unless the book is really, really, really good. Because then, fuck it. I don't even care if you believe me. I just need to talk about this book. And frankly, I pity anyone who doesn't take it into their heart. Begging your forbearance, I'd like to read one short poem called First Memory. Long ago, I was wounded. I lived to revenge myself against my father, not for what he was, for what I was. From the beginning of time, in childhood, I thought that pain meant I was not loved. It meant I loved. That was maybe a weird choice of poem for me to read tonight because it wasn't written by James Allen Hall. It was written by Louise Gluck, the Nobel Prize-winning poet, one of Dr. Hall's favorite poets, who died last Friday. Here are the last two lines of another of Gluck's poems. If I wanted only to hold you, I could hold you prisoner. And here are the last two lines of another of Gluck's poems. Change your form and you change your nature, and time does this to us. Okay, here are the last two lines, say it with me, of another of Gluck's poems. It's this stillness we both love. The love of form is a love of endings. So what I just did was take something weird and make it even weirder through repetition. I did that because it's funny to me. There's also a better reason, which is that those four poems, First Memory, Circe's Power, The Parable of the Dove, and Celestial Music, are the four poems that Dr. Hall named off the top of his head when 3 days ago I asked which Gluck poem was their favorite. It can't possibly be an accident that the endings of those four poems focus on four different themes: childhood as home to pain and love, the deep trickiness and potential for abuse in relationships, changing one's nature by changing one's form, and a love of endings that are at the very heart of Dr. Hall's new book, Romantic Comedy. Diane Seuss, the Pulitzer Prize-winning poet who picked Romantic Comedy as the winner of the Leavis Prize, called the book a masterpiece of queer self-creation. In an interview in The Rumpus, Julie Marie Wade calls Dr. Hall a writer of startling, luminous prose. Dr. Phillips sorry, Carl Phillips calls Dr. Hall's work, quote, by turns searing and forgiving, iconoclastic and unexpectedly, as if in spite of themselves, sacred. Mark Doty describes Dr. Hall's poems as psychically charged, nervy, both measured and fevered, compassionate and outrageous, and alive to the very core. Measured and fevered is perfect. You're about to find out why. And Claudia Rankine describes their work as, quote, a brilliant exploration of the structure of feeling, an astonishing sleight of hand that inflates representation in order to deflate the inner screen that provides both the darkness and the monsters. All of those people are right. Please help me welcome my boss and friend, Dr. James Allen Hall.
The first humiliation after Roy is like lowering a mic. He's so tall. Thank you, Roy. That was really, really sweet. I really appreciate that. I'm sorry I asked you to. I'm sorry I made you do all of that. I just said, just say my name and I'll sit. You know. Anyway. So I'm gonna read some poems from this book, romantic comedy, which took me like 10 years to write, and is about the sort of the difficulty of living in a queer-phobic, toxic culture, and how taking in the stories, the representations that queer people see about themselves causes real damage, and then how stories can help us save our lives. So I'll start with a poem called Blackberries. It's a true story, I'll say that too. Not all of the stories in here are true. What do you have to know about it? Growing up, in the summers, I was sent down to Homestead, Florida. Anyone from Homestead, Florida? Good for you. That's the best choice you can make, really. And to pick fruit for my grandmother's farm. She had a lychee orchard, and so that's what we would do. And my parents would stay in Central Florida and probably smoke a lot of weed. I hope my mom's watching on this. She'll be proud. Blackberries. Can you all hear back there? Okay, all right, good. Grandma marches us barefoot at dusk into brambles. My feet are calloused, but he's 10, my little brother. And when he gets thorned, begins to cry, I turn us houseward, carrying his weight. Someone ought to toughen you up, I hear Grandma mutter. God damn you, spits like a seed between my lips before I can reckon right. The dusk holds its breath, the blackberries stiffen their spines. Suddenly, I know what I am capable of and for whom. I am sent to my room without dinner, am summer-long exiled, forced to pick the blackberries and lychees too, reaching from ladders affixed to white vans, my brother calling up, high climbing notes, his voice yet to drop. Someone ought to, and I call down, God damn you. Then we're taking turns, reversing the parts, relishing the tart sting on our tongues. I actually devised this reading so I would get to say God damn at the beginning and at the end. What you need to know for this poem is just that in the early 80s, there was a boy who was abducted from a mall in Hollywood, Florida, which is about 4 hours from where I grew up in Florida. And he was never seen alive again. His name was Adam Walsh. His father, John Walsh, created a center to look for missing kids, and then also was a TV host for America's Most Wanted. So that may ring a bell. It references something my mother swears she didn't say, but we can't trust her. And I don't think she's watching really, but I would still say that. Anyway, my mother would say this every time we left the house in our little town in DeLand, Florida. So it starts with that. Prophecy. Remember, my mother says, they found Adam Walsh in pieces, buttoning my jacket, kissing my cheek, sending me off to school directly across the dead end road. Street severed by woods, I couldn't shake its prophecy. In school, we play hangman. On the chalkboard, a neck in a rope, a word underneath in dashes, letters looming from the fog, filling in the blanks until one grinning boy hangs another. My brothers and I remember that phrase being repeated to us in our childhood. Not fondly, but like we laugh at it now. Because what a weird, I mean, literally, we had 4 houses on our street, and it was a dead end street. And we went right across the street to the school. So it was like, remember, violence, bye, you know? It was just one of the oddest things. And once my brother came home, we lived together for a while when I was doing my PhD, and he came home and he said, remember when mom used to do that thing with Adam Walsh? And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. It was just like one of these days where our childhood came back into focus. This poem is called Erotic Crime Thriller. So the book like does the stuff with genres because for a lot of my life, and I suppose maybe other queer people feel this way too, I've felt both hyper visible and invisible, sometimes at the same time. And I always had to translate, I don't know, like love songs on the radio, right? I always like had to translate myself into one of the parts. And it just didn't seem to be a story for me. And Adrienne Rich, as turfy as she can be, she says something at the end of a poem about finding a book of myths in which our names do not appear. And that really had a big effect on me because I wanted to write a book in which our names do appear. So this poem is about a movie made in 1980, well before many of you and your parents maybe were born. That's so weird, right? Yeah. I guess I don't. That's true. Anyway, so the movie is called Cruising. It was made by William Friedkin, who's the same guy who did The Exorcist, which gives you kind of an idea where this is going. And the movie is about an undercover cop who goes undercover to catch a serial killer in the BDSM queer community, someone who is targeting gay men in the Leather Levi BDSM community. And the other thing you need to know is that many actors play the killer. It's as if the killer is kind of a virus and he keeps jumping bodies. I think that's all you need to know. You may later want to look up poppers, but I'm not going to tell you what that is. Erotic crime thriller, Cruising, 1980. It's just a flimsy mattress in a hookup motel, a night when the moon is a single stud in a leather sky. Just a bed, smelling of spilled poppers, until 2 men enter. Then it's a story. One lays himself naked, face down, offering his wrists, ankles to be rope knotted, the thrill of seeing what exists after extremity. The movie's first image, a hand floating in a helpless river, crossfading into a couple of male cops forcing 2 queer sex workers, their painted mouths. All sex is a body trying to tell a story with a hand over its mouth. Because this is erotic crime, what follows are hours of leather bar dancing, the ball sweat skulking off the celluloid, and plenty of interrogation. The killer spreads like a plague. First, one nondescript actor plays him, then another, until the undercover cop catches the serial virus. This being 1980, the end of innocent beds, of innocuous jocks, foam parties, condomless trade. As if the director, in conjuring the end of taboo, in strobe light, in dim urinals, in park bushes, under the spinning doom of moon, in trying to make us subject, has subjected us to ravage instead. My friend says I'm dramatic, says you can't blame art for epidemiology. Forgive me. I have come here to the river, to the bed, to the foaming edge of time, to 1980, a year before the first reported cases. I have come with my one good hand and all my blood, and I will say anything to save us. I've taught creative writing since like 2001 or so. It's been a minute. And for a very, very long time, anytime a queer character showed up in a story, they died. And they only died two ways. They died from a hate crime, or they died from AIDS, right? And it's hard to tell you what that does to a person, like semester after semester, year after year, right? Like, why can't we imagine other stories? So this is a poem called Stock Character, and it's not about my students writing, because it's not about them. That the idea that like they are just mirroring representation that they see, right? We can't imagine other stories because the only stories that we have about us are we die. Stock character. Man with gun at his temple, man with pills, man hanged, man stabbed, man crushed by oncoming tractor trailer, man throbbing with death wish, man with one leg already over the precipice. It's like I invented him in a romantic comedy so stale it needs a body count to liven things up. It's like he jumps from one story to another, trying to find the one where he gets to live. But I can't just waltz in and tell man with razor at wrist he's a trope. Man, terminal with American imagination, deteriorating syndrome, is never out of work. Just last week, on Law and Disorder, he suicided unironically in a posh Miami salon. I could contradict every role, but my body looks good, half caged, in straight imagination. There's a little bit of anger in this book. I don't know if you could detect that. The last poems I wrote for this book were these poems called Genre Theory, where I thought a lot about how these stories of violence become their own kind of genre, and if we could imagine other kinds of genres or imagine other theories of narrative. This one references a comedian named George Burns. Some of you may know. It also references watching the national conventions on TV that are televised. What else do you need to know? Also, whenever my parents and my brothers and I would have movie nights, like family movie nights, did any of you have these things? I had a really good penchant for picking gay movies. I didn't even know. I would just like, this one looks interesting, right? And so, yeah, my parents would be like, another one? Like that. All right, so this is genre theory. Happiness, George Burns says, is having a large, loving, caring, close-knit family in another city. Houston hosted the Republican National Convention in 1992 when we lived in Florida, a safe distance away from Pat Robertson telling the country that Clinton wanted, quote, to repeal the ban on homosexuals, part of his, quote, radical plan to destroy the traditional family. At least one pope called the family unit, quote, the first essential cell of human society. HIV was first named gay-related immune deficiency in May of '82. Family, a cell that duplicates unthinkingly. When I chose for movie night, I was notorious for selecting stories about people like me, Peter's friends, or Philadelphia, being at home with Claude, the hanging garden. My family protested I had a radical plan to make myself visible. Never mind that the gay men always died. I should have picked Haynes and Almodovar, Van Sant and Araki. I didn't know then how to elect my own family. Derived from Latin, famulitis, meaning servitude. As when my uncle kissed my sister on the stairs and she confessed to me, then hissed, writing this will mean betrayal. Family, why do I hear failingly? Family, something you leave if you want to stay alive. I almost asked Roy to bring up an image from a YouTube video as the backdrop for this reading, and then I didn't want it there the whole time. This poem references Anita Bryant, who, again, people my age and a little older may remember as a beauty queen turned political spokesperson who helped repeal pro-gay laws in Miami in the late 70s. She was also a spokesperson for Florida orange juice. Yeah. I think she's still alive too, by the way. We could go visit her. Let's go now. Road trip. Who's got a big car? Anyway, so what happened so she took her sort of anti-gay rhetoric nationwide on the sort of like speaking tour, and at one of them, she got pied in the face by a protester named Tom Higgins. And when I really need an up, and share videos aren't working for me that day, I watch this video. I have it like bookmarked on my computer. Anyway, so this is On Dark Days, I Imagine My Parents' Wedding video. My mother, Anita Bryant, waves to the cameras without looking at the men behind them, her chastity intact, unassailable as her perfect coiffure, dark as coffee, the white saucer of her face. The news conference is a whirl of men, microphones. Save the children blaring on a banner behind her. I am waiting to be born, a child unlike others, one my mother would not save. The reporter's blazers are plaid, unbuttoned. He's disguised like them, the man approaching the dais, my father. I love my mother, innocent, smiling at the softball questions. I like the hiding in plain sight that the man and the Anita are doing before they become my parents. I like knowing more than the camera. And here is the moment, their kiss. The man slaps a pie square in Anita's face. She hadn't seen him coming. She was saying, what they want is the right to propose to our children that theirs is an acceptable life. Then it's time for cake. I like his hate, which hates her back. She is my mother because she says, "At least it's a fruit pie," then begins to sob. I like watching her dissolve. 30 years ago now. My father, dead, buried. And no one remembers his name. This is the obligatory 2-poem warning. So I went to a small liberal arts college in Central Florida, and I was a history minor. And I think, you should know that this poem references rape a few times, sexual assault, and it says the F slur a few times as well. So I'm just going to delay a little bit in case you need to like leave the room. That's totally cool with me. This is early English history. Was too early. 8 a.m., Tuesday, Thursday, Elizabeth Hall. I slouched half asleep, first road, demarcated from the frat boys sitting in back so they could see up the professor's skirt. In the mead hall after, they surrounded, let me close if I shared my notes. I was in love with the black-haired outfielder, his backwards Braves cap, until he called me fag for refusing to rate our teacher's underwear. I didn't know how to fight back. I learned that semester about the rebel Queen Boudica, whose revolt razed 3 Roman forts and the emperor's temple. Tacitus provides motive, her husband dead, kingdom annexed, Boudica flogged, her daughters raped. The armies she led tortured its captives, but he doesn't say why. Some pain is negligible. Its survival cancels the wound of its birth. Most accounts say she poisoned herself, facing defeat. Cassius Dio gives her longer, secreted away to the south, living unrecorded for years with her daughters. The boys in my class drew stick figures fucking on the wall by my room after I came out. I woke at night to wash the crooked glyphs, the caption proclaiming AIDS kills, fags dead. They misspelled AIDS, by the way. I just have to let you know. And I considered briefly in that moment just correcting it and leaving it, but I didn't. I scrubbed until what remained was I scrubbed until what remained was fist-sized, vague and pink, a map of the possible world. Our final project was to cook an authentic English banquet, eaten family style at the professor's house. At the appointed time in the year of our Lord, I came with dessert, but did not see the moat she'd installed in her foyer. The strawberry pudding flew like an arrow, pink spurting everywhere, especially across the faces of those boys, whose names were lost the moment I joined an insurrection begun in AD 61 by a dissident queen. In the years since my disappearance, I have cemented my escarpments, foddered my cannon, sewn up my flag. I am painting my face, bluing my body with woad. Warn them, I am coming to punish my Romans. When I wrote this poem, it was the second poem I wrote for the book, and I knew it was going to be the title poem. I had been in Chicago for MLA, which is its own circle of hell. It's a academic conference, but I was there to interview people for a job where I was teaching then. And my only joy, aside from 12 hours of being in one of those rooms that we all know, if we're in the English department, was getting to see the movie Enchanted. Do you know that movie? Some of you do. Some of you, the younger ones, know that one. They'll no. Anyway, it's like sort of like a Cinderella movie where the heroine falls from Technicolor into the real world, and and I had seen Jasper Johns's Grays, and I wanted to write a very like a repeated kind of a poem that just keeps repeating to see like how many colors and nuances I could get out of one word. The word is goddamn, so you're about to hear that a lot. I think that's all you need to know. Romantic comedy, Enchanted, 2007. Goddamn the snow that sent me into the theater for 2 hours refuge in projected light. Even if I only wanted escape, goddamn my wanting. Goddamn the romantic comedy, a genre pockmarked by selves who never fulfill themselves. Goddamn the men like me holding hands next to me in the dark, their snippets of growl gilding the film, their delight at the comic heroine's transformation from cartoon to flesh. She falls from Technicolor to Times Square, rising from the underground in her marriage gown. Goddamn her flawless skin, her eyes rinsed red, waking in a drain pipe at the beginning of a soured century. And then, God, after the movie's over and I've been flung into another city's sprawl, after I've been released from the fold, forlorn, damn the bride emerging from the Renaissance Hotel across the salted avenue, a vision in an unsullied dress. Goddamn the fabric so luminous in the portrait, looming from its frame, filling us with longing to bite it into shreds. Goddamn, what's wrong with me? I can't stop thinking about the fairy tale princess, her optimism a perfumed wind in a flagging sail, as if no one is shipwrecked on the shores of love always fails us. The groom is whispering, "God damn, you're wet," in the hotel laundry to a bridesmaid whose white fur wrap is a strip of fallen weather on the cement floor. Goddamn all beauty made in betrayal. Goddamn the bride, she wants to live the heroine's life, all shivering lip and beaded veil. Goddamn her until she is weeping, the cartoon fool. The goddamn concierge opens the door for her, bending elegantly at the waist to palm her dress into the limousine. He fingers the slight hem. Goddamn him, showing us what he could do to skin on the belly, skin on the thigh, my untouched cheek. Goddamn the wind, it isn't the hand of a lover. Goddamn the wine glass shattering inexplicably at the best man's toast. The best men, the worst men, the extras in the movie which brought me to tears, God damn them, and the gift of my body. God damn the land and the air, the fish and the fowl, the light in the day and the night in the night. But do not damn the lit cigarette I'm holding too close to my face. Not it, God. Though it burns, acrid between my fingers, it does not leave me alone to lift my face up out of the halo of darkness in the cold of Chicago. Thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
I tried to tell you. You want to do some questions?
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to.
Are there any questions?
No questions.
We got a minute or two if anyone has anything they'd like to ask Dr. Hall. We've got one in the back.
Yeah, they were. I mean, the ones that I remembered were like Philadelphia, Being with Claude, The Hanging Garden. I'm missing one. I needed four.
Yeah.
Being with Claude actually wasn't one that but I needed four for the poem. I don't know. Real weird. And then, I mean, really, like, Almodovar is, like, pretty cool. People
Okay.
get to live there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking notes.
Yeah. That's Spain, though, you know?
Other questions?
Anything else?
10 years to put this book together? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. When I started, I had just broken up with somebody and I thought I was going to write about that. Oh, before that, I should say I had written this first book, mostly about my mother, called Now You're the Enemy. She's thrilled about the title. And that book was really an examination of my relationship with my mother and how, like, my parents, watching their awful relationship sort of impacted my ideas of love, romantic love. And I was really happy to move out of that town. It's a really dark town. Now You're the Enemy. And I said, I'm going to be as honest and raw about my own experiences as I had been about, of course I was about my own experiences in that book too, but really, knowing I was going to write about my own experiences, I wanted to be even more raw, even more honest. And that was I didn't know that doing that would actually save my life. So part of the book is also about surviving sexual assault. And thank God I was writing about my life and in honest ways, because it took me a year to even understand what happened to me, honestly. There's no stories about that, right? Like, men, as identified, they don't survive, they don't suffer and survive sexual assault, right? I would tell people the story, friends of mine, what happened, and they'd be like, oh my God, that's awful. I'd be like, yeah, well, it wasn't like it was the R word or anything. Like, it really took me 6 months to realize. It took me a year and a half to allow myself to be with somebody else, too. Like, it was just really awful, but thank God I was writing, because I wrote myself into realizations of that. And then, the book's a little dirty, maybe a little. There's some dirty, and pretty. I like dirty and pretty. And those poems are not everyone's cup of tea. So the last 3 years that the book I'd taken in 2020, and the publisher was like, if you don't mind waiting, I was like, let's wait. There's a whole pandemic around. Who knows what books? Can we afford paper? Can we get? Anyway. So 2017 to 2020, I was sending it out a lot and getting a lot of, like, semifinalist rejections. Publishing for poetry is kind of in a contest model. And then I sent it to Four Way, who had rejected it 6 times before. I'm just stubborn, I guess, or stupid maybe. Anyway, resilient. We'll go with resilient. And so I sent it to them because the guest judge, I really admired her work, Diane Seuss, and she picked the book. So then they had to publish it. I was like, no takesies backsies. So yeah, and Four Way has been really great to work with. But so that was, I almost gave up though. I almost was like, well, maybe it's just time to work on a different book. You just know at some point that you've done all you can for a book, for a project. There's nothing else you can do for it. And so you just have to set it aside at that point. At least I do. I don't know. Other
for audio purposes, I'm going to ask Dr. Hall to use the microphone.
Oh, so sorry. Oh, that's right. We have my mom's listening online, so she really wants to know. She's very litigious, so we could get a lawsuit out of this. Yes, in the back. Oh, thank you. This one is yeah. I did. They asked for they wanted Four Way Books wanted me to be very happy with the book, although they reminded me they have final control over it. They also want the book to look a certain way in their aesthetic. And so when they asked, like, but what are clues? What things would you what kind of visual art are you thinking about? Are you drawn to? I sent them this painting by Alex Merritt. And the reason I knew this painting was because of a student at Washington College at the time, Justin Nash. Some of you may remember Justin. Was an English and art. I think Justin was an art minor at the time. I don't think Justin graduated with an art major anyway, but Justin turned me on to this painting. And so I was like, something like this. And they're like, oh no, this is it. And yeah, so I wanted something rambunctious, almost comic. I mean, these are rugby players. Also wanted somebody in a bigger body on a cover. I did, rather than, I didn't want, I wanted sort of masculine energy for the cover. It was important for me that way because this book is about toxic masculinity and surviving that, toxic patriarchy, we can call it. And the guy's face is like, is he laughing? Has someone stubbed his toe? Is he crying? Did he lose? It's hard to tell, and I think that's kind of the emotional line that the speaker in the poems is walking a lot. These are really good questions. I'm happy to answer another. And
Yeah, I was just delighted to know that you're a history minor. You were a history minor.
I was.
Always a history minor.
Yes,
I knew that.
once and always, yes.
Yeah, and the sense of history is just so strong in so many of these poems, from Tacitus to Anita Bryant.
That should be the subtitle of this book.
But I also, I'm thinking about how much queer history there's been just in the 10 years since you started writing
Yeah.
this book. And I wonder, as you look back on this decade of queer history during which you've written, I don't know, for me, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit in my question, but for me, when I look at history, I'll sort of marvel at one moment at how much things have changed, and at the next at how little things have changed. So I wonder if you have any reflections on either change or continuity in queer history since you started writing these poems.
I guess I've always been really drawn to dissident history. Like, how have we managed? The Rebel Queen, girl. Yeah. Like, how have we managed to take up Boudica's flag in a way, right? And like, what a thing she did, in AD 61. I mean, I think right when I was starting, the story that I might be telling here. Right when I was starting to write this book, I read an article by you about a gay man in the colonies who was pressed to death. Sort of the first execution of a queer person on American soil. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Say the name again. Richard Cornish. Yeah. And that article really inspired me and actually may have just sort of set me on a little bit of a journey. So I know I've told you that before, but I don't mind making that public, that one of my deep inspirations is Adam Goodhart before we even knew each other. It's really true. Yeah. We have to pay attention because it's not done, right? And it's why things like censoring queer voices hurts even more when it happens, especially in places where allyship is proclaimed. I'll leave it there. Yeah. And now, go be happy. There's happiness too. There's a history of queer joy too. Maybe that's the next book, right? Maybe that's the book you all will help write too. I hope so.
Any happiness happens, can we get one more round of applause
Oh.
for that?
Thank you. And I'll just say thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to all of you for coming, but thank you to my colleagues who made me do this too. I was not going to give a reading from this book, and they said, no, you've got to. So thank you, Linda, Amber, and Roy. All right, have a good night.